I pulled off I-40 somewhere in rural Arkansas around 11 at night. I'd been driving since dawn, pushing through to make it to my sister's place in Kansas City, but my eyes were starting to close on their own. The smart thing would have been to stop hours ago, but I kept telling myself just one more exit. The roadside inn sat about a quarter-mile off the highway, one of those single-story strips wrapped around a parking lot. The neon sign buzzed and flickered, missing a few letters. 14 other cars were scattered across the lot when I pulled in, which seemed like a decent sign. Not empty, not packed. The guy at the desk looked about 65, watching a small TV behind the counter. He barely glanced up when I walked in. "Need a room for the night," I said. $72, cash or card. I handed him my card. He ran it through one of those old manual sliders, the kind I hadn't seen in years. While he processed it, I noticed the wall behind him had a pegboard with room keys hanging on hooks. Actual metal keys, not cards. "Room 16, he said, sliding the key across the counter. "End of the row, left side." The room was exactly what I expected. Worn carpet with mysterious stains, a bedspread that had seen better decades, a TV bolted to the dresser. But the sheets looked clean when I pulled them back, and the bathroom didn't smell like mildew. I've stayed in worse. I took a quick shower, checked my phone, barely 1 bar of service, and climbed into bed. The mattress was harder than I liked, but I was tired enough not to care. I woke up to voices. My phone said 2:17 a.m. At first, I thought it was coming from the TV, but the screen was dark. Then I realized it was coming from next door, through the wall behind the headboard. A man and woman arguing, their voices muffled, but clearly angry. I couldn't make out the words, just the tone. I've lived in apartments. Thin walls are nothing new. I put the pillow over my head and tried to ignore it. The argument got louder. Something hit the wall hard enough that I felt it through the bed frame. Then the woman screamed. Not the kind of scream you hear in a regular fight, but genuine terror. I sat up, fully awake now. My heart was pounding. Another crash, more screaming. Then it stopped. Complete silence. I waited, phone in my hand, trying to decide what to do. Call the front desk, call the police. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe they just stopped fighting. But that scream kept replaying in my head. I got out of bed and pressed my ear against the wall. Nothing. Not even the sound of a TV or movement. I put on my jeans and shoes, grabbed my room key and stepped outside. The parking lot was quiet, lit by a single overhead light that cast everything in yellow. Room 17, next to mine, had its curtains drawn. No light coming from inside. I stood there for a moment, feeling ridiculous. What was I going to do? Knock on their door. Then I noticed something. The door to room 17 wasn't completely closed. It was open about an inch, the lock not quite catching. I knocked gently. "Hey, everything okay in there?" No answer. I knocked harder. "Hello?" Still nothing. I pushed the door open slowly. The room was dark, except for light spilling in from the parking lot. I could see enough to tell the layout was identical to mine. Bed, dresser, bathroom door on the right. "Hello?" I said again, louder this time. I reached around the corner and flipped the light switch. The room was empty. Not just empty of people, empty like nobody had been there. The bed was made, the surfaces clear. No luggage, no personal items, nothing. I stood there confused. I'd heard them. I'd heard them clearly. The fighting, the screams, the impact against the wall. I checked the bathroom. Empty. Checked the closet. Nothing. Then I noticed something on the carpet near the bed. Dark spots, still wet. I crouched down to look closer, careful not to touch anything. In the dim light, I couldn't tell what it was, but it looked like someone had tried to clean something up and hadn't quite gotten it all. That's when I saw the maintenance door. Every room had one. I'd noticed it in my own room earlier. A small door built into the wall, maybe 2 feet by 3 feet, where maintenance could access the plumbing and electrical. Mine had been screwed shut, painted over multiple times. This one was open just slightly, an inch or two. I backed toward the main door. This was way beyond what I was comfortable with. I needed to get the desk guy or the police or both. I was almost out when I heard it. A wet dragging sound coming from inside the maintenance space, like something heavy being pulled across concrete. I ran. Didn't look back, didn't close the door, just ran straight to the office. The desk guy looked annoyed when I burst in. "The room next to mine," I said, trying to catch my breath. "Room 17. Something's wrong. I heard fighting, screaming, and now there's something in the maintenance space." He stared at me for a long moment. "Room 17 is vacant. Has been for 3 days. I heard people, a man and woman fighting. The door was open and there's something on the carpet and the maintenance door." He held up a hand. "Let me call the sheriff." He picked up the phone, but I noticed he didn't seem particularly concerned. Like this wasn't the first time someone had reported something about Room 17. The sheriff's deputy arrived 20 minutes later. Young guy, couldn't have been more than 25. I told him everything while the desk guy stood there expressionless. We all walked over to Room 17 together. The door was still open like I'd left it. The deputy went in first, hand on his belt near his weapon. He checked the bathroom, the closet, then crouched down where I'd seen the wet spots on the carpet. "There's nothing here," he said. "I saw something. Dark spots right there by the bed." He shined his flashlight on the area. The carpet was cool, dry. Whatever I'd seen was gone. Then he went to the maintenance door and pulled it fully open. Shined his light inside. Just pipes, wiring, dust, nothing else. The space was barely deep enough for a person to crawl into, and it didn't go anywhere. Just a utility access point. "Sometimes sounds carry weird in these old buildings," the deputy said. "Could have been from a different room. Echoed through the vents or pipes. Happens more than you'd think." I wanted to argue, but what could I say? There was no evidence of anything. They let me go back to my room, but I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed, door locked and chained, lights on, until the sun came up. I checked out at 6 a.m. Different person at the desk, an older woman who smiled and asked if I'd slept well. I just nodded and left. I got about 10 miles down the highway before I realized I'd left my phone charger plugged in by the bed. I almost turned around, then decided I'd rather buy a new one than go back to that place. 3 weeks later, I was scrolling through news on my phone and saw a headline: "Human remains found in Arkansas motel during renovation." My stomach dropped. The article said contractors renovating the roadside inn off I-40 had discovered human remains hidden in the crawl space behind the walls. The remains were old, at least a decade, possibly longer. Police were investigating, trying to identify the victim. The article included a photo of the motel. I recognized it immediately. I thought about calling the sheriff's department, telling them what I'd heard. But what would I say? That I'd heard a fight that left no evidence in a room that was empty weeks before they found something that had been there for years. It wouldn't make sense. It didn't make sense. But I know what I heard, and I think about it every time. I'm on the road, looking for a place to stop for the night. I stick to the chain hotels now. the ones with electronic locks and security cameras, because sometimes the walls in old places remember things, and sometimes late at night they play them back for whoever's listening. The conference ended at 4:00, and I should have just driven the 6 hours home. Should have. But my boss had scheduled an early meeting the next morning back at the office, which meant I'd have to leave by 5 a.m. to make it in time. The math didn't work. I needed sleep somewhere. I tried 3 hotels near the conference center in Columbus, all booked. Some medical convention had taken every room within a 10-mile radius. The 4th place I called suggested I try the Motel farther out off I-270. The Moonlight Motor Lodge was exactly the kind of place I usually avoided. 2-story exterior corridors, parking lot that needed repaving. But it was nearly 8 p.m. I was exhausted, and they had a room available. The woman at check-in was probably in her 40s, friendly enough. She explained that the ice machine on the 2nd floor was broken, but the one on the 1st floor worked fine. Continental breakfast from 6 to 9. Wi-Fi password was written on the key card sleeve. Room 209, 2nd floor, middle of the building. The room smelled like industrial air freshener trying to cover up cigarette smoke. The carpet was that pattern designed to hide stains, and the bedspread had several small burn holes near the edge. But it was just one night. I ordered a pizza, ate half while watching cable news, then took a shower. The water pressure was surprisingly good. I set my alarm for 6 a.m. and got into bed around 10:30. The ice machine woke me up. Not the sound of it running, the sound of someone using it, the steady clunk, clunk, clunk of ice dropping into a bucket over and over. Way more ice than anyone would need. I checked my phone. 1:47 a.m. The sound continued. Clunk, clunk, clunk. Then footsteps in the corridor outside my door, passing by. Then silence. I was almost back asleep when it started again. Clunk, clunk, clunk. More footsteps, going the other direction this time. Then again, same pattern. Ice machine, footsteps, silence. Ice machine, footsteps, silence. After the 4th time, I got up and looked through the peephole. The corridor was empty, lit by fluorescent lights that gave everything a greenish tint. I could see the ice machine about 30 feet away, next to the vending machines. I waited. Sure enough, after about 3 minutes, a figure appeared. A man in a white t-shirt and jeans, holding an ice bucket. He walked up to the machine, filled the bucket. I could hear the ice clattering in, then walked past my door toward the stairs at the end of the building. Okay, just someone who really liked ice, or maybe keeping drinks cold for a party. Annoying, but not my business, except he came back 5 minutes later. Same guy, empty bucket. Went to the machine, filled it again, walked past my door. And again, and again. By the 6th trip, I was getting irritated. Nobody needs that much ice. I opened my door as he was walking back toward the machine. "Hey, man," I said, trying to sound friendly despite being annoyed. "You, okay? That's a lot of ice." He didn't respond, didn't even look at me, just kept walking to the machine, filled his bucket, and headed back past me toward the stairs. I stood there in my doorway, confused. He'd walked right by me, close enough that I could have reached out and touched him, and he'd acted like I wasn't there. I watched him go down the stairs, then waited to see if he'd come back up. He did, about 5 minutes later, with the empty bucket. "Hey," I said, louder this time. "Can you keep it down? People are trying to sleep." Nothing. He walked to the machine, filled the bucket, walked past me. I could hear his footsteps, hear the ice rattling in the bucket, but he didn't acknowledge me at all. I went back inside and called the front desk. It rang 10 times before someone picked up. Yeah? A man's voice, groggy. Hi, sorry to bother you, but there's a guy on the second floor making a ton of noise with the ice machine. He's been doing it for like half an hour straight. Silence on the other end. Hello, I said. The ice machine on the second floor is broken. Has been for a week. No, I can hear it right now. There's a guy filling a bucket over and over. Sir, that machine doesn't work. It's unplugged. I'm looking at him right now through my peephole, I lied. He's using it. Another pause. What room are you in? 209. I'll come check it out. I waited by the door. The man with the bucket made 2 more trips while I stood there. Then I heard footsteps coming up the stairs at the other end. Heavier footsteps, different rhythm. The night clerk appeared, a heavy-set guy in his 40s wearing a Bengals t-shirt. He nodded at me, then walked over to the ice machine. He stood there for a moment, then pulled out his phone and used the flashlight to look at something. Then he turned and walked back to me. Machine's unplugged, he said. Has been for days. Compressor shot. But I saw someone using it. Nobody's used it since we unplugged it last Tuesday. Then what's that sound? We both stood there listening. The hallway was silent, except for the hum of the lights. I don't hear anything, he said. But then I did hear something. Footsteps coming up the stairs. The same rhythm as before. The man in the white t-shirt appeared at the top of the stairs, empty ice bucket in hand. He walked toward the machine. That guy, I said, pointing. Right there. The clerk looked where I was pointing. I don't see anyone. The man walked right past us. I could see him clearly. Maybe 30 years old, brown hair, white t-shirt with some kind of logo on it, faded jeans. He went to the ice machine, reached for the dispenser, and his hand went through it. He mimed filling the bucket, and I heard the sound of ice dropping, but nothing was actually falling. The bucket stayed empty. Then he turned and walked past us again, heading for the stairs. I felt cold all over. You really don't see him? The clerk's expression changed. He'd been annoyed before, but now he looked uncomfortable. Go back to your room, he said quietly. Lock the door. I'll take care of this. Take care of what? What is that? Just go inside, please. I did what he said, hands shaking as I locked the door. I stood at the peephole watching. The clerk stood in the hallway for a minute, then walked to the ice machine. He did something I couldn't quite see, then headed back toward the stairs. The footsteps came back. I watched through the peephole as the man appeared again, walked to the machine, went through the motions of filling his bucket. I could still hear the ice, even though nothing was happening. I backed away from the door and sat on the edge of the bed. The sound continued. Clunk, clunk, clunk. Footsteps, silence. Over and over. I tried putting in earbuds and playing music, but I could still hear it underneath. Tried covering my head with pillows. Nothing helped. At some point, I must have fallen asleep from pure exhaustion, because I woke up to sunlight coming through the curtains and my phone alarm going off. I packed my stuff quickly and went down to check out. The woman from last night was back at the desk, looking fresh and cheerful. How was your stay? She asked. Fine, I lied. Hey, what's the deal with the ice machine on the second floor? Her smile faltered slightly. Oh, it's broken. Should be fixed next week. The guy last night said it's been broken for a while. Yes, about a week and a half now. Has anyone else complained about noise from it, even though it's broken? She looked at me for a long moment. Sometimes people hear things in old buildings. The pipes, the air conditioning. Sounds can travel in funny ways. That's not what I asked. She handed me my receipt. Have a safe drive home. I made it to my car and sat there for a minute, trying to decide if I should just let it go. Then I pulled out my phone and searched Moonlight Motor Lodge Columbus. Most of what came up were reviews, the usual complaints. Dated rooms, thin walls, sketchy neighborhood. But then I found something else. A news article from 8 years ago. Local man dies in motel accident. The article was brief. A 34-year-old man staying at the Moonlight Motor Lodge had been found dead in the second-floor ice machine. The machine had malfunctioned while he was reaching inside to clear a jam, and he'd been crushed. The article said he'd been getting ice for his sick wife, who was in the room with a fever. The police had ruled it an accidental death. The motel had been cited for faulty equipment. I looked at the photo accompanying the article. The victim's name was redacted in the version I found online, but there was a picture of the motel after the accident. Crime scene tape across the second floor. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at that article. Then I drove home, and I didn't stop until I got there. I wasn't supposed to be in New Mexico at all. My flight from Denver to San Diego had been canceled. Something about a mechanical issue. And the airline couldn't get me on another flight until the next afternoon. They offered a hotel voucher, but it was for a place near the airport that I knew would be overpriced. Instead, I rented a car and decided to drive part of the way. I'd stop somewhere in New Mexico, get some sleep, then finish the drive in the morning. It had actually saved time compared to waiting around the airport for 20 hours. I made it to the outskirts of Albuquerque before I started feeling tired. It was nearly midnight, and the highway was mostly empty. I took an exit that promised gas and food. Found a cluster of businesses, mostly closed for the night. The Sunset Palms Motel had a vacancy sign glowing in green neon. The building was U-shaped, wrapped around a parking lot with a swimming pool in the center. The pool was lit up, glowing turquoise in the darkness. The night clerk was a young guy, probably early 20s, focused on his phone. He checked me in without much conversation, took my credit card, and handed me a key card. Pool closes at 10 grand, but I don't really enforce it, he said. Just try to keep it down if you go in. Room 120, ground floor facing the pool. The room was actually nicer than I expected. Clean, modern, like they'd renovated recently. I dropped my bag, changed into shorts and a t-shirt, and thought about that pool. I'm not normally a late-night swimmer, but the desert heat was still radiating off everything, and the water looked perfect. I grabbed a towel from the bathroom and headed out. The pool area was small, maybe 20 FTX 40 FT, surrounded by a chain-link fence. A sign on the gate said, "Pool hours, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m." But the gate was unlocked. Lounge chairs were scattered around the perimeter. I was alone. I dropped my towel on a chair and tested the water with my foot. Perfect temperature. I slid in and started swimming lazy laps back and forth, enjoying the quiet. I was on my 4th lap when I noticed someone else had come out. A woman sitting in one of the lounge chairs near the deep end. She was wearing a dark swimsuit, and her hair was wet like she'd just gotten out of the pool. I hadn't heard her come in. I stopped at the shallow end, treading water. "Hey," I said, "nice night for it." She didn't respond, just sat there facing the pool. I felt awkward, so I kept swimming. When I came up for air at the end of the next lap, she was gone. I looked around. The gate hadn't made any noise, but she definitely wasn't there anymore. Maybe she'd gone back to her room. I did a few more laps, then decided to call it. I pulled myself out of the pool and grabbed my towel. That's when I noticed the wet footprints. They led from the pool to one of the lounge chairs, the one where the woman had been sitting, then just stopped. They didn't continue to the gate or anywhere else, just ended at the chair. I stood there, dripping, staring at those footprints. They were already evaporating in the dry air, but they'd definitely been there. I wrapped the towel around my shoulders and headed back to my room. When I glanced back at the pool, I saw her again. Same lounge chair, same position, facing the water. I stopped and stared. She hadn't moved, hadn't shifted position at all, just sitting there completely still. "Hey," I called out. "You okay?" No response. I walked back toward the pool fence. "Miss?" She stood up slowly and walked to the edge of the pool. Then, without hesitating, she stepped off the edge and into the water. Not jumped, not dove, just stepped forward like she was walking down a staircase. She sank straight down and didn't come back up. I ran to the fence. "Hey! Hey!" The water was still. No ripples, no bubbles, nothing. I yanked the gate open and jumped in without thinking, still wearing my towel. I dove down to where I'd seen her go under. The pool had lights on the bottom, so I could see clearly. The water was maybe 8 efta deep at that end. She wasn't there. I surfaced, gasping. Looked around frantically. Nothing. The pool was empty except for me. I pulled myself out and ran to the office, leaving wet footprints across the concrete. The night clerk looked up, startled as I burst in, dripping water everywhere. "There's someone in the pool," I said, breathing hard. "A woman. She went under and didn't come up." He stood up quickly. "What?" "The pool. She walked in and sank. We need to call 911. He grabbed his phone and ran with me back to the pool. We stood at the edge, looking down into the clear, lit water. Empty. "I saw her," I said. "She was sitting right there. Then she walked into the water." I pointed to the spot. The clerk walked around the pool, checking. Then he crouched down and touched the concrete. "These are your footprints. They're the only wet ones here besides the puddles you're making now." I looked down. He was right. Just my prints leading from where I'd gotten out earlier, and the new ones I'd just made. "She was here," I insisted. "I saw her sitting in that chair. Then she got up and walked into the water." The clerk pulled out his phone and opened an app. "This is the security camera feed." He showed me the screen, black and white footage of the pool area. I could see myself swimming, getting out, standing there with the towel, then running back toward the office. No one else was in the frame. Just me, alone in the pool. "I don't understand," I said. "I saw her clear, as I'm seeing you right now." He closed the app and looked at me for a long moment. Then he sighed. "How long have you been awake?" "I don't know. Since 6 this morning, I guess. That's almost 20 hours. You're probably just tired. The mind plays tricks when you're exhausted, especially in unfamiliar places. I know what I saw. Listen," he said, quietly. "Go back to your room, get some sleep. In the morning, this will all make more sense." I wanted to argue, but what could I say? The video showed I was alone. There were no wet footprints except mine. No evidence anyone else had been there. I went back to my room and stood in the shower for a long time, trying to warm up. Even though it wasn't cold, when I finally got into bed, I kept the TV on for noise. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her walking into that water. Around 3 a.m., I gave up and opened my laptop. I searched for Sunset Palms Motel Albuquerque and started reading reviews. Most were standard stuff, cheap, clean, Convenient location. But then I found a review from 6 months ago. Decent place, but the pool is weird at night. Saw someone swimming after midnight. And when I went out to check, nobody was there. Probably just tired from driving, but it freaked me out. Another from 4 months ago. Don't use the pool after dark. I know that sounds strange, but trust me. I kept searching and found an old news article from 17 years ago. A woman had drowned in the motel pool. She'd been drinking, went swimming alone late at night, and didn't come back up. Her body had been found the next morning by housekeeping. The article included a photo of the motel, same U-shape, same pool, and a photo of the victim, a woman with dark hair, probably in her 30s. I sat there staring at that photo for a long time. I couldn't be completely sure. I'd only seen her at a distance in the dark, but the hair was the same. The build was the same. I closed the laptop and laid back down. The TV was showing an infomercial, something about kitchen knives. I watched it without really seeing it, just letting the sound fill the room. When the sun finally came up, I packed my stuff and checked out. The day clerk was an older woman who smiled and asked if I'd slept well. "Fine," I said. "Hey, can I ask you something? Has anyone else reported seeing things by the pool at night?" Her smile didn't waver. "We have excellent reviews on our cleanliness and customer service. Was there a problem with your room?" "No, Never mind." She handed me my receipt. "We hope you'll stay with us again if you're ever in the area." I drove straight through to San Diego. Didn't stop except for gas. Made it in just over 5 hours. I've driven past Albuquerque a few times since then for work. I always take the same exit, more out of habit than anything else. And every time I see that green neon vacancy sign for the Sunset Palms Motel, the pool is still there, still lit up at night, glowing turquoise in the darkness. I've never stopped there again.